One of the best driving songs I know is Red Barchetta or Red Barchetta by Rush. I always felt there was a movie inside those lyrics. So just for fun, on this episode of Life at 100 MHz, I decided to simply give the lyrics to AI and see what it would come up with. Sorry, there is no music in this podcast, just an analysis of the lyrics. For a video analysis of the song, you can catch a little video I made at lifeat100mhz.com. Enjoy.
I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine sneaking out of your house every single Sunday. You're actively eluding, like government surveillance, hopping onto massive freight trains, and literally crossing fortified borders.
Right.
And why are you doing all of this? What is the grand purpose behind risking your life and your freedom? Well, it is just to commit what you call a weekly crime. A crime that involves absolutely nothing more than turning a key and starting an engine.
It's wild, Rhett. It just, it strips away all of our comfortable modern assumptions about what constitutes a crime.
Yeah, completely.
It really forces you to look at a society where the mere act of mechanical combustion, like just driving a vehicle yourself, is treated like high treason.
Exactly. So the source we're looking at today for this deep dive is a firsthand account we have titled My Uncle Has a Country Place.
Mm-hmm.
And it outlines this high-stakes act of rebellion in a heavily regulated futuristic world governed by something called the motor law. But, we aren't just going to walk through the events of this account.
No, there's so much more to unpack here.
Right. We're going to look at the mechanics of why a society would outlaw driving in the first place, the psychological toll of living in a perfectly safe world, and the inherent brittleness of over-engineered technology.
Because the foundational element of this entire society is the elimination of friction. We don't have the exact legislative text of this motor law, obviously.
Yeah.
But its effects are absolute.
Right.
It appears to have systematically removed the danger, the unpredictability, and crucially, the human element from transportation. And, when you remove human error from a system, you usually have to remove human agency right along with it.
I mean, think about your own life right now. Think about how many apps you use daily just to avoid the friction of waiting in a line or going to a store.
Or even parallel parking.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We are constantly engineering inconvenience out of our lives. And this source essentially shows us the logical endpoint of that trajectory. A world so perfectly engineered for safety and efficiency that feeling the road beneath your tires is literally illegal.
Yeah, and that pursuit of total safety creates a heavily segregated physical world. I mean, look at how the narrator talks about their routine on Sundays.
It's so specific.
It is. They have to elude the eyes. They hop onto a turbine freight train, ride it until it slows down, jump off at the borderline, and then make their way to a hidden farm owned by their uncle, which is located far outside the wire.
See, I'm struggling to understand the logistics of that control, though. If the surveillance is that absolute, if they have these watchful eyes everywhere, how does someone consistently escape the city limits every single week?
It's a good question.
It just seems like a massive blind spot for an otherwise omnipotent state,
Well, control systems, especially massive ones, they optimize for the majority. They monitor the highways, the designated pedestrian zones, the digital networks.
Right.
But a massive turbine freight train represents the industrial, authorized infrastructure. The narrator is essentially surfing the blind spots of the state's own machinery.
Oh.
Yeah. The turbine freight implies this continuous impersonal scale of motion. By hitching a ride on something so functionally invisible to the authorities, the narrator just, slips through the cracks.
And then they hit the wire and the border line. And this isn't just a line on a map. It feels like a chronological boundary as much as a physical one.
Absolutely.
They're crossing from the hypermodern regulated zone into an unregulated, forgotten space.
Because the authorities have basically cordoned off the past, the physical infrastructure of this control, the wire, separates the authorized present from the unauthorized history.
It's like a quarantine zone.
It's exactly a spatial containment strategy. If you keep the messy analog history physically separated from the sterile digital present, the citizens are just way less likely to experience the contrast.
But the narrator does experience that contrast. I mean, they risk crossing that heavily monitored borderline every Sunday. And the reason they do it brings us to the artifact hidden in the uncle's barn.
The relic itself.
Right. They strip away decades of old debris, and underneath it all, preserved perfectly for 50-odd years, is a shining car. A brilliant red Barchetta.
And this shows that the uncle is basically operating as a rogue archivist.
A rogue archivist. I like that.
Yeah, he hasn't just hidden a piece of metal, right? He has taken it upon himself to protect a physical manifestation of human history from the ideological cleansing of the motor law. Keeping this car pristine has been his dearest dream.
And the way the narrator describes the experience of driving it, it's just pure sensory overload. They fire up the willing engine and it responds with a roar. Tires spitting gravel, wind in the hair.
All those raw details.
Yeah, they call it mechanical music and an adrenaline surge. They mention the well-weathered leather, the smell of hot metal and oil, the scented country air, sunlight gleaming on chrome. I mean, they say they feel every nerve aware.
Look at the contrast between those sensory details and the world they came from, though.
Oh, it's a night and day.
The turbine freight, the sterile city, the watchful eyes. It's an existence completely devoid of tactile feedback. It's a totally frictionless environment.
Right.
Then you have the red Barchetta. It is pure, unmediated, raw reality. The smell of oil, the vibration of the engine, the physical resistance of the steering wheel. These are elements of friction that have been actively engineered out of their modern society.
I want to push back on the uncle's noble archivist motive for a second, though, or at least how the narrator interprets it.
Okay, sure.
Because listening to those descriptions, the hot metal, the blur of the landscape, the excitement, is this really a profound act of honoring the past? Or is the narrator essentially just an adrenaline junkie?
That's interesting.
Like, are they just chasing a dopamine hit that has been outlawed in their sanitized world?
It's a fair distinction to draw, but I think in a society constructed entirely around safety and compliance, seeking out an adrenaline surge becomes an inherently political act.
Oh, because just feeling something is illegal.
Right. The narrator is an adrenaline junkie by the standards of their society, precisely because feeling every nerve aware is forbidden. The ultimate form of rebellion in a hyper-optimized, perfectly safe society isn't necessarily violence. It's choosing inefficiency.
Choosing inefficiency.
Yeah, choosing to do something dangerous, loud, and manual is a reclamation of human agency.
Choosing inefficiency as rebellion. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you see shades of that today when people choose to shoot on film instead of digital
Or buy vinyl records instead of just streaming everything.
Yes. It's the desire to hold something that requires maintenance, that has flaws, that forces you to be an active participant rather than just a passive consumer. Only here, the stakes are literally life in prison.
And that active participation requires a symbiosis between human and machine.
Right.
The internal combustion engine of the Barchetta isn't a passive pod that just ferries a passenger around. It requires a driver. It requires physical input, micro-adjustments, and understanding of the gears and the RPMs. That relationship is exactly what the motor law eliminated.
But there is a fatal flaw in seeking out that kind of raw friction, right? Because friction creates noise.
It does.
And in a society built on silent compliance, noise is a beacon. You can't cause an adrenaline surge and tear through a quiet country landscape with a roaring engine without drawing the attention of the very forces you spent all Sunday trying to elude.
Exactly. The thrill is the trap. The sensory experience they are chasing, the mechanical music, the spitting gravel, is exactly what shatters the quiet of the country and alerts the authorities. The act of rebellion inherently exposes the rebel.
Which triggers the confrontation. I mean, the narrator's out there shifting gears, completely in the zone, when suddenly, ahead of them, across the mountainside, a gleaming alloy air car appears.
The enforcement arrives.
And it shoots toward the narrator. The physical description of this thing is terrifying. It's described as being 2 lanes wide. The narrator spins the Barchetta around with shrieking tires and takes off, running this deadly race back through the valley. And then a second air car joins the chase.
Look at the asymmetry of this conflict, though. It operates on a systems engineering level as much as a narrative one.
How do you mean?
Well, the gleaming alloy air cars represent the massive, imposing scale of the New World Order. They dominate the road, literally taking up 2 lanes. The fact that they are air cars indicates a smooth, frictionless operation. They hover.
Right, they don't even touch the ground.
Exactly. They don't engage with the terrain. They simply glide over it, projecting absolute, inescapable power.
They are the physical embodiment of the society itself. Broad, smooth, and completely disconnected from the dirt and gravel of the actual earth.
Yes. And against this, the red Barchetta represents human vulnerability. It is small, it relies on tires actually gripping the pavement, it is susceptible to mechanical failure, but it also possesses agility.
And that agility is what leads to one of the most brilliant tactical maneuvers in the whole account.
Absolutely.
The narrator is fleeing these massive alloy giants, screaming through the valley, laughing out loud with fear and hope. They execute a desperate plan. They drive like the wind, heading straight for a one-lane bridge.
See, this isn't just a lucky escape route. It is a profound lesson in technological brittleness.
Tell me more about that, because, on the surface, it just looks like a classic David and Goliath move.
Yeah.
You just lead the big guy into a small space.
It is David and Goliath, sure, but the mechanics of why it works are crucial here. Over-engineered massive systems, like those two-lane wide air cars, are optimized for broad, frictionless environments. They are built for the modern superhighways of their era.
Right.
But when a system is highly optimized for one specific environment, it loses its adaptability. It becomes brittle.
So they literally lack the structural flexibility to navigate anything outside their designated parameters.
Precisely. The one-lane bridge is an architectural choke point from a bygone era. It represents the unregulated, narrow, analog past. The air cars are physically incapable of crossing it because their own technological advancement and their bloated size has become their fatal flaw.
I wondered about that. Since they are air cars that hover, why couldn't they just fly over the river or bypass the bridge entirely?
That points right to the limitations of their design. Being an air car likely means they operate on a cushion of air over a prepared surface, or, maybe they are tethered to specific authorized routing grids.
Oh, so they aren't like airplanes.
Right, they aren't airplanes. They require the broad paved infrastructure of the state to function. So when they're confronted with the raw geography of a river and a narrow historical bridge, their technology is just totally useless.
That is incredible. The very thing that makes the Barchetta obsolete, its small size, its reliance on a narrow wheelbase, its analog mechanics, is exactly what allows it to survive.
Yes.
The narrator slips right over the bridge, leaving the two-lane wide giant stranded at the riverside. They use the state's own massive inflexible infrastructure against it.
It just proves that efficiency is not the same thing as resilience.
Wow, yeah.
The old machine is resilient because it is adaptable, and it's directed by a human mind capable of improvising a desperate plan. The new machines are efficient, but the moment they encounter an out-of-bounds variable, like a one-lane bridge, they fail completely.
So they secure a clean getaway. They leave the authorities physically stuck on the wrong side of the river, just staring at a relic they can't catch. But man, the emotional come-down from that chase has to be intense.
Oh, for sure.
The account ends with the narrator racing back to the safety of the farm. The car is hidden away again under the debris, and the narrator goes to sit by the fireside and dream with my uncle.
It is a necessary deceleration. They go from this screaming, high-speed sensory explosion back to the quiet crackle of a fire. But, the text leaves us with a lingering tension.
Because the state is still out there.
Exactly. They won the race today. They utilized that technological choke point to escape, but the eyes and the alloy air cars are still out there. The surveillance state hasn't been dismantled. It's just been temporarily outmaneuvered.
It's a temporary victory in a permanent war. The society still wants compliance, silence, and order. But the human spirit, as represented by the narrator and the uncle, clearly still craves the roar of an engine and the feeling of the wind.
Yeah, when you synthesize all these elements, the sterile surveillance, the hidden artifact, the tactile thrill, and the brittle technology of the state, the source illustrates the enduring human need for a space outside the wire.
We need that friction.
We require friction to feel alive. We require an environment where our actions have immediate physical consequences, rather than having every experience mediated and smoothed over by algorithms and safety protocols.
It really makes you evaluate the conveniences we accept every day. We don't live under a motor law, but the world is relentlessly pushing toward more automation, more efficiency, and just less human intervention.
Oh, constantly.
It makes you wonder what parts of our current, messy, visceral human experience might one day be deemed too dangerous, too loud, or too obsolete to allow in public.
History shows us that as societies prioritize absolute security, the spaces for unmediated human experience inevitably shrink. They get pushed to the margins, hidden in barns or relegated to the borders.
Which leaves you with a pretty compelling question to think about. Look at your own life, your own routines, the things that bring you a sense of grounding and visceral reality.
Mm-hmm.
If a sweeping new regulation were passed tomorrow, something that outlawed a practice or an object you consider deeply human, raw, and tactile, all in the name of safety and efficiency, what is the experience you would refuse to give up? What is the analog, inefficient piece of your humanity that you would carefully wrap up and hide down in a barn for 50 years? What is your red Barchetta?
Neil Peart from Rush based these lyrics from a 1973 short story called A Nice Morning Drive by Richard Foster. Unfortunately, a movie would require a lot of red tape. Other movies that contain a similar chase scene include THX 1138 by George Lucas, 1971, The Last Chase, 1981, Mad Max Fury Road, 2015, and Ready Player One, 2018. I hope you enjoyed this episode. See more at lifeat100mhz.com.